One big way Star Trek. Lower Decks is more realistic than TNG. In one particular way, Star Trek, Lower Decks is more realistic than Star Trek, The Next Generation. The adventures of the USS Cerritos just came to an end with the series finale of Star Trek, Lower Decks on Paramount+. As Captain Carol Freeman, Don Lewis, and the eclectic crew of the USS Cerritos came together to save the universe from an unstable quantum fissure. After the Cerritos created a permanent portal to infinite Star Trek timelines, Starfleet moved Starbase 80 to the wormhole's entrance and put Captain Freeman in charge of the missions to other quantum realities. Following Captain Freeman's exit, Commander Jack Ransom, Jerry O'Connell, accepted a promotion to become the new captain of the Cerritos. Several other characters have been promoted throughout Star Trek, Lower Decks' 5 seasons, including all of the Lower Deckers. Lieutenants Brad Boimler, Jack Quaid, Beckett Mariner, Tawny Newsome, Sam Rutherford, Eugene Cordero, and Devanna Tendi Noel-Wells all began the series as ensigns but ended as junior-grade lieutenants. Promotions in Star Trek, Lower Decks happen at a much more realistic rate than they ever did on Star Trek, The Next Generation. Star Trek, Lower Decks' Starfleet promotions are more realistic than TNG. Star Trek, Lower Decks takes place from approximately 2380 to 2382, and several promotions happen on the USS Cerritos during that 3-year span. Although Starfleet is not technically a military organization, its command structure is set up much like the United States Navy. Starfleet officers begin their careers as cadets at Starfleet Academy and work their way through the ranks after being assigned to a starship or space station. Starfleet officers generally receive a promotion after a particularly impressive achievement or successful mission. While many of the characters on Star Trek, The Next Generation kept their ranks throughout the show's 7 seasons, Star Trek, Lower Decks promoted their officers significantly faster. As ensigns, Boimler, Mariner, Rutherford, and Tendi were at the bottom of the command structure on the Cerritos and often received menial jobs that reflected that. As the show progressed, however, they were promoted to lieutenants, junior grade, and given more responsibility. Captain Jack Ransom's promotion to captain also happens faster than those on TNG. Commander William Riker, Jonathan Frakes, never became captain of the Enterprise D. Star Trek, The Next Generation's reluctance to promote its officers had more to do with the television landscape of the time than it did with any in-universe reasoning. Television of the 1980s and 1990s was mostly episodic, meaning each episode began and ended with the characters more or less in the same place, narratively speaking. If Riker had accepted a promotion to captain during TNG, for example, it would have drastically changed the status quo. For this reason, the characters were rarely promoted, and even when they were, their ultimate role on the ship did not change much. Geordi LaForge, LeVar Burton, was promoted the most on TNG, becoming a full lieutenant at the start of Season 2 and a lieutenant commander about a year later. Still, LaForge served as chief engineer from TNG Season 2 onward, and his change in rank did not seem to alter his role on the show. Counselor Deanna Troi, Marina Sirtis, became a full commander in TNG Season 7 and began wearing a Starfleet uniform. Star Trek, Lower Decks offered a more realistic time frame for promotions rather than the often static command structure of Star Trek, The Next Generation. Star Trek, Lower Decks, LD, and Star Trek, The Next Generation, TNG, both explore the adventures of Starfleet officers in the 24th century, but they do so in vastly different ways. While TNG has been celebrated for its high-minded ideals and exploration of utopian themes, LD offers a fresh, comedic perspective on the everyday lives of lower-ranking crew members. Though the tone and style of these two series are worlds apart, there is one significant way that Lower Decks is more realistic than The Next Generation: its portrayal of everyday life and imperfections within Starfleet. The idealism of The Next Generation. TNG, which premiered in 1987, introduced audiences to the sleek and sophisticated starship Enterprise D, captained by the stoic and commanding Jean-Luc Picard. The crew of the Enterprise D embodied the ideals of Starfleet: rationality, diplomacy, courage, and a steadfast commitment to the betterment of humanity and the galaxy. Picard's leadership style was emblematic of this vision. He made decisions based on ethics, logic, and a deep respect for other cultures, and his crew followed suit. However, TNG's portrayal of life aboard the Enterprise D often leaned heavily into the utopian ideals of the Star Trek universe. The crew was almost always composed of hyper-competent, emotionally stable individuals. Conflicts were resolved through diplomacy or clever problem-solving, and interpersonal disagreements were relatively rare. The crew's professionalism was almost flawless, with everyone acting in perfect harmony toward common goals. Even in times of crisis, the crew of the Enterprise D often remained calm, level-headed, and perfectly suited to handle whatever challenges they faced. This idealism extended to the way the show depicted Starfleet itself. Starfleet officers were portrayed as paragons of virtue, representing the best of humanity. There were few signs of the bureaucratic inefficiencies, personal flaws, or institutional shortcomings that are often part of real-world organizations. As a result, while TNG offered a hopeful and inspiring vision of the future, it sometimes felt detached from the messy reality of human nature and organizational dynamics. The grounded reality of Lower Decks. In contrast, Star Trek, Lower Decks, which debuted in 2020, takes a far more grounded approach to Starfleet. While still set in the optimistic and hopeful Star Trek universe, LD is more focused on the daily lives of lower-ranking officers aboard the USS Cerritos, a less prestigious starship than the Enterprise D. The show's protagonists, Ensigns Boimler, Mariner, Tendi, and Rutherford, are not high-ranking officers solving galaxy-shaking crises. Instead, they deal with the mundane realities of life in Starfleet, from tedious paperwork to grueling away missions. This shift in focus allows LD to depict Starfleet in a way that feels more relatable and, in many ways, more realistic. Unlike TNG's officers, the characters in LD are flawed, and the show does not shy away from showing their mistakes, insecurities, and personal struggles. Boimler, for example, is overly ambitious but often fumbles in his attempts to impress his superiors. Mariner is a talented officer, but her rebellious nature frequently gets her into trouble. Tendi and Rutherford are both enthusiastic about their work, but they're still learning the ropes and make plenty of errors along the way. This portrayal of flawed, fallible individuals is far more in line with how real-world organizations function. In any large group of people, there are bound to be mistakes, personality clashes, and less than perfect outcomes. By showing these aspects of Starfleet, LD presents a more nuanced and realistic depiction of what life in such an organization might actually be like. Bureaucratic frustrations and everyday struggles. Another way LD grounds the Star Trek universe in realism is through its portrayal of the bureaucratic frustrations that come with serving in a large, hierarchical organization. In TNG, the crew of the Enterprise D rarely has to deal with red tape or inefficient decision-making. Orders are given, and they are carried out smoothly. However, in LD, the crew of the Cerritos often faces frustrating bureaucratic hurdles. For example, there are episodes where the crew is bogged down by endless paperwork after missions, or they are assigned menial, seemingly pointless tasks by their superiors. These situations are played for comedic effect, but they also reflect a truth about real-world organizations. Not every job is glamorous, and not every task feels important. The characters in LD often feel the weight of their lower ranks, and they have to navigate the same frustrations and obstacles that come with working within a large system. This portrayal adds a layer of realism that TNG, with its idealized vision of Starfleet, rarely touched upon. Interpersonal conflicts and realistic relationships. TNG's characters, while close-knit, rarely experience significant interpersonal conflicts. Any disagreements were usually resolved quickly, with characters acting